So we're going to be discussing the basics of pitching. So a pitch shot, by definition, is a shot that travels more in the air than on the ground, usually used with a lofted club like a sand wedge or pitching wedge to get over an obstacle like a bunker or a water hazard, or even some deep rough. Now, in order to get this ball airborne, we have to remember that we have to hit the ball first and then the ground, not the ground and then the ball. So I'm going to bring this club up here, and this is a training club that we use here at the Academy. And what we want to do is, if we start with the club nice and straight, or the leading edge nice and straight, you can see that naturally this angle is actually leaning towards the target. That's going to help us get the leading edge underneath the equator of the ball and get it airborne. If at impact the club head is, or the shaft, excuse me, is leaning backward, you can see that it's going to hit the equator of the ball rather than underneath the equator of the ball. And that's going to send the ball sending like a line drive, or even hit the top of it. So we have to make sure when we arrive at impact, the shaft here is leaning forward so that there's a slight descending blow on the golf ball to get that leading edge underneath the golf ball and get it airborne. Okay, so how do we do that? So the first thing we need to do is make sure we adjust our setup. So for this shot, since it's a smaller shot and a distance control shot, we want to make sure that our feet are a little closer together. So maybe about 2 club head widths apart. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we lean our weight forward. So we want to get our sternum, and we want to make sure the sternum is over the ball or just slightly in front of the ball. We never want to have the sternum behind or the weight leaning backwards. So you can see, as if I do this and I lean myself, if I try to push my weight forward with my hip, I'm going to tilt my right shoulder down and my sternum leans back. That's only going to encourage us to hit the ground behind the ball instead of in front. So what we want to do is we want to take our sternum or our buttons and make sure they're on top of the ball or just slightly in front, so you can see I'm leaning everything. A great visual, if you have trouble seeing that, is take your hands, put them on top of your kneecaps in an addressed position, and then slide your left arm down your knee, and you can see how I actually lean forward, my sternum moves forward, and I'm moving ahead of the golf ball. That'll put about 60% of your weight on your lead foot, so the center of your lead foot, not the outside or the inside, so the center of your lead foot, and that's where it's going to stay throughout the swing. So then when we do that and we lean forward, you're going to notice that my hands and the club head lean forward, so there's a slight lean towards the target with the shaft, and when I put my hands on there, you'll see that they're right in line with the inside of my left thigh. Okay, so that's a great setup, and you can see that the ball is right in the middle of my stance because we want to get this airborne. The more forward or more backward we put this in our stance, you can see the shaft leans forward and I deal off the club, so it's not going to get up in the air as much. Okay, so we want this ball right in the center of our stance. So now from here, what we want to do is we're going to use a mantra. We're going to try to hinge the club up. So we're using our wrists and we're pushing the handle down to get the club to create some leverage and get up in the air. So you can see I'm pushing down to get the club up in the air. Now if I turn to you sideways, when I do this, I want to make sure when I hinge the club up, the toe of this club is up to the sky. We don't want the club face to point down like this, or the club face to point to the sky. You can see the club face in the correct position is actually pointed this way. So when I face the camera and hit the shot for real, as I hinge the club, the toe is up in the air, and the club face is actually pointing to the camera, maybe even slightly down to the ground, but not too much down, but not too much upward. Okay, so we're keeping our hands somewhat in the center of our body, and we're going to use our wrists to hinge up. We're not moving them way off the ball. So we're going to hinge the club up, and then what we're trying to do is maintain this little angle that we create, this little, we call it L position or 90-degree angle here we create between our wrist and the club, and we want to try to maintain that. And all we're going to do is we're going to pivot through and then point the club to the target. You can see again my club is about in the toe up position, so it's not too much to the ground or it's not too much to the sky. Okay, so our mantra is going to be either swing from L, turn through to Y and point the club, or you can do hinge, turn, and resist or hold here. We never want to finish with the club up here. We want it to point to our target, so we maintain those angles. If we do this, we're going to get some angle in our wrist, and we don't want to do that because that's going to add loft to the club and maybe even hit the middle of the ball like I showed you before. So again, get our weight forward, hinge, turn, and resist. And make sure you take a practice swing or two. And I have a ball here for convenience, but you can see when I take my practice swings, I'm hitting the ground right in line with the ball and slightly in front of it, never back here, okay? So one more time. We're gonna keep the ball in the center. We're gonna shift our weight forward so our sternum is over the ball or slightly in front. Then we're gonna hinge the club back to the toe-up position. We're gonna pivot, turn through, and resist the finish, okay? So let's try one. Hinge, turn, and resist. So next time you're having trouble with your pitch shots, use that technique and let me know how it works out.